Hello, everybody, and welcome aboard. Welcome to Lunch with Len and Laura. It is Tuesday. It's, oh my God, it's February. What month is it? March 21st. Is this the first day of spring or the first half day or the second? They're trying to confuse us this year completely. They're trying to make the first day of spring be two different days.
Well, it starts on one day and finishes on the next. I don't know. Maybe they're just making it a long spring day.
How can they do that? How can they do that? I don't understand this. Anyway, welcome everybody. Hey, I'm going to pick up a bit of a thread that was started last week, and the thread is that people were asking. They were making comments. I don't have a newsletter. I don't know where to get a newsletter. I don't know what's a newsletter. I don't know what. I don't honestly remember what all the comments were, but I'm going to pick up on that thread. But before we do that, Laura, did you have anything you wanted to talk about today? You had mentioned Facebook and Twitter in your video.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I have Twitter on the brain right now, but this morning in my daily video, I mentioned that today we were going to talk about Facebook and Twitter on here, and I had forgotten that Len said we were doing newsletters. So anyway, I just wanted to say sorry about that. I had Twitter on the brain, and if anybody has any Facebook or Twitter questions, then let us know. We will help you offline.
Tweet. All right. I'm going to talk about newsletters, and I don't think this is going to be one session. I think it's going to be more than one. Some of you, about what I'm about to say is really old hat. You know it. I'm going to bore you to tears. And so, if you decide to go away and do something else, my feelings aren't going to be hurt. But we're going to talk about newsletters, and I am going to go to screen share in a minute. But before I do that, let me just say this. I think the word newsletter is being used interchangeably and incorrectly in some ways. So a newsletter isn't a blog isn't a newsletter, although they could be. They're not the same thing. And a website isn't a newsletter, although it could be. A newsletter is a piece of paper. You don't have to have a website. You don't have to have a blog. You don't have to have any fancy schmancy stuff to have a newsletter. And you don't have to have any fancy schmancy stuff to have a list of names to mail your newsletter to. There were newsletters long before there was an internet. Oh my God, really? They had newsletters back in the old days? Yeah, back in the days when there were outhouses and there weren't any toilets. My son came up to me one time when he was in his teens. He looks at me and he says, "Dad, when you were growing up, did they have toilets?" So it's amazing. The newsletters actually existed before there was an internet. So we don't have to complicate it with a lot of technology, although we can use the technology to help us generate newsletters and make it easy for us. So let's talk a little bit about newsletters, how they get generated, where they come from, and some of the simple ways that you can end up with a newsletter. So I'm going to go to a screen share. Actually, before I share the screen, before I go off the screen share, I'm going to stop sharing. Before I go off the screen share, let me finish that story about my son, because you'll get a kick out of this. He looked at me one day and he says, "Dad, when you went to school, they didn't have all these hard subjects like chemistry and stuff." That was his excuse for failing chemistry, by the way. Okay, on to newsletters. Here we go. Present to everyone. Lunch with Len and Laura. That's what we're doing today. And we're going to talk about newsletters. What's a newsletter? This is the textbook Google definition of a newsletter, a bulletin issued periodically to the members of a society, business, or organization. Notice it doesn't say anything about a website or a blog in that definition, and that's the important point I want to get across to you. You don't need any of the fancy schmancy technology to have a newsletter. It helps. is a regularly distributed publication that is generally about a main topic of interest to its subscribers. So if you have a topic of interest, I know that there's somebody on here who's interested in essential oils, for example, and you want to write a newsletter about essential oils or about organic food or about health and fitness or wellness or travel or anything, you can do that. Start typing. You don't even need a typewriter. I mean, hell, they probably had newsletters back before they had computers, you know, back in the really old days when they actually had to write things on pieces of paper. Does anybody remember what paper looks like? I mean, so the reality is, and the message that I'm trying to give you is, don't complicate this thing more than it needs to be. If you want to have a newsletter, you don't have to have all this other stuff to have one. You can sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and write a newsletter. And you can actually put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it to somebody. Most of us probably don't remember how to do that, but it's just a regularly distributed publication, generally about a main topic that is of interest to its subscribers. And so you can gather up a group of people that want to know what you want to talk about, and you can generate a newsletter for them. Now, we'll talk about how to use the technology to make this easy. But once again, I want to pound home the idea that you don't have to have technology to make a newsletter functional. Although, and I'm not even going to comment on these days and times of emails, and people generally email newsletters. And we're probably getting to a point where maybe they get distributed via SMS text or something too. I don't know. But, you know, as the open rates go down with emails, it becomes harder and harder to get people to read newsletters and read emails. But nevertheless, you can. Now, let's differentiate a newsletter from a blog. What's a blog? First off, the word blog, it does imply some technology here. The word blog is a contraction of the term web log. It's a type of website, usually maintained by an individual, with regular entries of commentary, descriptions of events, or other materials such as graphics or video. Entries are commonly displayed in reverse chronological order, which simply means that the thing I put in today is at the top. Blog, web log. It was a contraction from a day and time when the internet was not quite as sophisticated as it is today, and people were using things on the internet to just keep a log of events, just write things down. Instead of writing it on a piece of paper, they were using a file. Maybe they were using Excel or Word or WordPress or WordPerfect or something like that. Just, you know, writing things down. Now, you can make a newsletter with your blog, but you don't have to have a blog. And there are some pretty easy ways to get a blog if you want one. But again, it's not necessary. So let's move on. So they're not the same. Functionally, a blog can be made to act like a newsletter. And in my case, that's what I do. And we'll sort of go through that. But what I want to say to you is, if you're new to the game, as some people are, if you don't have a website, if you don't have a blog, if you don't have any of this fancy technology, you can still have a newsletter, and you can still mail things to people. You can type a newsletter in WordPerfect or Word or any of them. I'm sure there's lots and lots of publications out there. There's Publisher. There's lots of things that you can use, and then you think, well, does my newsletter have to be fancy, and does it have to have pictures and be formatted and yada, yada, yada? And the answer is no, it doesn't. It doesn't really. You can make it fancy. You can make it have pictures. You can make it look nice. But you don't have to do that. And there's lots of pieces of software that you can use to generate a nice looking newsletter. Now, once you have a newsletter, what are you going to do with it? Well, let's just stop for a second and ask ourselves, email is probably the most effective, efficient, and best way to deliver a newsletter to a group of people. These days and times, running out to the post office with a stack of envelopes, licking stamps, and mailing things to people probably isn't the most efficient way to do it. So, you know, content creators often cite the ease of creating, for example, a PDF document and emailing it to a distribution list on a weekly or monthly basis as a reason to use the newsletters, to use the model. And we can do the same thing with a blog. So if you have a blog, we could use the blog to generate your newsletter. I'm not going to talk specifically today about how to get a blog if you don't have one. And that's a topic we'll touch on maybe Thursday, maybe next Tuesday. I'll show you some different ways that you can end up with a blog if that's what you want to do. But once again, I want to emphasize that it's not functionally necessary to have a blog to have a newsletter. All you need for a newsletter is Word, or a piece of paper and a pen, for that matter. So let's talk about the way most people distribute a newsletter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what is an autoresponder, because that's really the most common way in today's technology to distribute a newsletter. So what is an autoresponder? It's a piece of software or a system that automatically sends emails to a list. Okay, that's pretty simple. You have a list of names, and we'll talk in a little bit about how those names get onto that list. But that's where we were last week. We were talking about generating a list and having names to mail to, and people were saying, well, I don't have one of those yet. I don't have an autoresponder. I don't have a list. I don't have a blog. I don't have a newsletter. Well, probably the simplest way is to start with an autoresponder, and to put names into the autoresponder as people give you permission to mail to them. It's what's called permission marketing. Permission marketing being people that have said, yeah, it's okay. They've held up their hand. They've said, yeah, go ahead, mail me your information. I'm interested in it. What we're not going to talk about today either is how to get people onto your list, and because we just simply aren't going to have time to go into it. But in the business of permission marketing, we generally have something that's called a lead magnet. What's a lead magnet? A lead magnet is something that you give for free in order to get permission to email subsequent stuff to the person. So you ask their permission to email them, put them on your list, and you give them something in return for that permission. For those of you who are with me in Asante, one of the things that you might think about is, well, the funnels that are back there. So you can offer the funnel pamphlet as a enticement for someone to give you their email address. And then you can decide what you want to email them and when you want to email it to them. For example, for those of you who are in MLSP, of course, MLSP has tons of stuff that you can use to gather someone's email information. But it's not necessary. You don't need MLSP. It is usually necessary that you have something that you're going to offer them in return for getting their permission to email them. But we can talk more about how to generate lead magnets, but not today. We won't get that far today. So many people tell you the money's in the list. You got to be building the list. And the truth is, the money isn't really in the list. The money's in your relationship with the list. Managing your list and making good relationships with the people is a topic of a whole course. We can do a whole course on it, on how to manage an email list. But here's the reality of that is that if you spam your list, you're not going to build a good relationship. So the trick is to lead with value. If you are building an email list, you got to lead with value. You got to give them good stuff. And just the same as we talk about posting in Facebook, for example, or posting in Twitter, you're going to put on 80% value and maybe 20% buy my thing. You're not going to hit your list day in and day out, hour after hour, several times a day, or even several times a week with offers. You're going to give them value. So you got to consider when you're managing your list what you want to do with it. Again, if you spam your list, then they'll just drop off. They'll ignore you. They won't open it. Your open rates will go down, and it won't do you any good. So the main benefit of using an autoresponder is the old thing that people need to be told about a product 7 times before they buy it. And we hear today that that number is actually going up. I hear quotes from 5 to 7 times, and I've heard as high as 14 times. But the reality is this: people, and you've heard this all before, it's trite and trivial, but it all ties into this. People don't buy products and services from companies, they buy from you. They get to know you. So you offer them something of value, you get their name and email address in return for this thing of value you gave to them, and then over a period of time, you drip value on them with an occasional interruption in the value stream by throwing an offer out there for them. And hopefully sooner or later, once in a while, they'll grab one of your offers and buy something from you, or they'll join your business, or whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. So the email, the email responder, the autoresponder, and the one I use, by the way, is Weber, which I'll mention in a moment. I'll show you that. The autoresponder simply gives you a mechanism to drip emails on them, either automatically or, when you write them, automatically or manually. Let me say automatically or manually. Some people that teach email marketing, and I'll mention Diane Hockman as a good example. Diane teaches that when you have an autoresponder, you put somebody on your list, the first email that goes out is automated. They automatically get an email that says, "Welcome to my list." And then from there on in, everything is done manually. You have something useful to say, you write an email, and you distribute it. Other people advocate using the autoresponder in a more automated sequence. You can have a sequence of emails that goes out to someone who's joined your list. So you can have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000 emails in a sequence that goes out automatically. And they get an email every day or every other day or every third day or whatever you determine you need to do or want to do from you. There's a lot of reason to not do that these days. But list management, again, is going to be beyond the scope of what we can talk about in today's webinar. For a couple of people out there that have very good courses on list management, Diane Hockman is one, Adam Chandler's another. They're both quite good at it. And they have different viewpoints on how to do it. They both get good results. So, but here's the deal. If someone bounces through your website or through your Facebook page or your Twitter or whatever else, what you want to do is get them on your email list so that you can drip on them, so that you can send them additional information, so that you can help them to get comfortable with you, so that you can even remember that you know them, and hopefully sooner or later they'll become a customer. So you can use your autoresponder to do that, to send messages out to people with their permission, convincing them, perhaps, and more importantly, educating them about your product or service. So an autoresponder is just simply a piece of software that lets you put people on a list and then drip emails on them. You set it up once. By its very nature, the autoresponder is, well, it's automatic. It does the rest. A potential new client opts in, or they register through what's called a squeeze page or a capture page, and their name is added to the list. And the reason they registered through that squeeze page or capture page or whatever is that you gave them something of value in return for their name and, again, their permission. So after that, then they receive the sequence of emails that you've determined ahead of time. Or if you do it like Diane does it, you do it manually. She basically emails her list approximately once a day, and sometimes more often, but generally she emails her list once a day. And she tells her people in the very beginning, when they get on her list, her welcome email tells them that they're not going to get automated sequences from her, that they're only going to get an email when she's got something to say. So what she does is she starts them off in the very beginning, conditioning them to open her emails, because she tells them that you're not going to get an email from me unless I have something important to tell you. So open my emails. And she's quite successful with it. So what else can I do with my autoresponder? Well, you can do bulk mailings. Like I mailed today a notice that we were doing lunch with Len and we were going to talk about newsletters. You can distribute an email, or sorry, you can distribute a newsletter with your autoresponder. And maybe we'll talk a little today, maybe not, I doubt it, about how you can use your autoresponder to actually generate a newsletter. But that's a pretty advanced topic. And you can have your autoresponder post to Facebook and other social media when you send out a newsletter with it. I generally don't especially have it post to Facebook. I generally keep Facebook so that I decide what gets posted to Facebook. I don't let my autoresponder post there, partially because I don't like the format that it posts in. I do let it post to Twitter when I send out what I'll call a newsletter, but that's it. Other things you can do with your autoresponder is you can actually generate capture forms. If you have a website that you need to embed a capture form on, you can generate a capture form with your autoresponder. So for example, this is an example of a form that I generated some time ago with Aweber. It just asks for their name and address and tells them I'm going to send them something if they give me their name and address. And that's a completely automated process. If they put in your name and address, they automatically get added to my email list, and then the autoresponder takes it from there and starts sending them emails. And once again, start sending emails that I've determined ahead of time. So, and I use Aweber, and the reason I use Aweber is really simple. Way back in dawn of time, somebody told me that they used Aweber. I don't honestly remember who it was. I have no idea. It doesn't matter. They simply said, I use Aweber, so I went and I got Aweber. And I have had good luck with Aweber. Aweber's customer, in my opinion, Aweber's customer support is beyond exemplary. It's probably the finest customer support on the planet. And the reality is when you pick up the phone and you call Aweber, they actually answer the phone. There's actually a human being. The human beings are responsive and they're knowledgeable. And I just have had such good experience with Aweber that I use them all the time. And plus, they're pretty inexpensive. I think it starts at $19 a month for up to 500 names on your list. Maybe I'm wrong. There might be a $9 a month version for less than that. I don't know. But anyhow, it's not real expensive as compared to other things. Some of the other systems that are out there are far more expensive and far more complicated to use. So anyhow, if anybody's out there on this webinar or seeing the replay and you don't have an autoresponder and you want to get one, go to lenmooney.com/Aweber and get a free trial. And what I had intended to do, and I'm not going to do it with only 5 minutes left, at this point, what I was going to do is I was going to go live and take you on out to Aweber and show you what you get out there. But I'm going to leave it alone for today because it's going to take more than 5 minutes to go to Aweber and sort of give you an idea of what an autoresponder really looks like and how it works. So we'll stop this for now. End the show. Go away. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So who's all here today? Bill, Deborah, Sue, Chris, Laura, and Carol, and me. Okay, that's us. So some of the people, a couple of people that were interested in newsletters aren't here, but yeah, that's the way it is. So I hope that helped answer the question, or sort of fill in the hole of, well, I don't have a newsletter now. What do I do? And I'll pick that theme up again, perhaps on Thursday, perhaps next Tuesday, and take you on the rest of the way, the rest of the journey. If you want to know a little bit more about what's in an autoresponder, how they work, we can do a little bit of that. And then we can also talk about, well, I don't have a blog and I'd like to have one. How could I make a blog? What's the easiest, quickest, fastest, simplest, cheapest way to get a blog? And if I do have a blog, how do I make my blog talk to my autoresponder so that it automatically generates emails for me, so or newsletters for me, so we can talk about. Yes, you can. You can have. Do you need an autoresponder to have a newsletter? Yes, of course. Here's the challenge you have. If you're going to email a list, you got to maintain the list somewhere, and then you have to say, okay, send this email to these people. How do you do that without an autoresponder? And the answer is you can do it manually. You can certainly do it in Outlook, for example. You can have groups in Outlook, and you can put an email name into Outlook and generate a group of people that want to hear about this and the people that want to hear about that. And you can do it all manually. So yes, you can. Yes, you can. The autoresponder makes it a whole lot easier, a whole lot less time intensive to maintain a mailing list. And the autoresponder gives you other features too. For example, if you are using an autoresponder and you're sending out emails, right at the top of the email is an unsubscribe button. So anyone who's getting your email and decides they don't want to hear from you anymore can unsubscribe. And that's pretty much a federal requirement that you have that option available to them. You've also got to have certain boilerplate in your autoresponder or in your emails that tell people that if they purchase something from you, you make money. No, it's like, oh, you mean if I actually buy something from you, you're going to make money off of it? Well, I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. So there are certain rules that you have to abide by, and if you're doing mass mailings. So the autoresponder actually makes it pretty simple to stay in compliance with the requirements. So it gives you an easy way for people to unsubscribe. It gives you an easy way to add headers and footers and signature lines and disclosures and et cetera. So I would highly recommend that if you're going to mail newsletters, that you start using an autoresponder to do it. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else? Anything else? So here we are at 11:59. Okay, here we are at 11:59. Let's close it up for today. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing on Thursday yet because I'm working on bringing a special guest in on Thursday, and I'm not going to say anything about it until I know for sure I can get him, her, whoever it happens to be. I'm not going to tell you, so you'll just have to come back on Thursday and find out. It's that simple. And if we don't have a special guest on Thursday, then you may have to put up with me again. And if you folks want, and you can tell me you don't. I mean, there's several people on here that I think I must have bored you to death today, and you're still there. But if you want, we'll continue right on down this path. We'll look at inside an autoresponder and talk about how they really work and what they do for you. And then we'll look at how we can integrate an autoresponder and a website together. And we'll look at how you can get a website pretty quick and inexpensively if you want to. So, okay. Having said all that, I'm doing the corporate webinar tonight for Asante, 6 o'clock. Show up, cheer me on.
Or 9 o'clock Eastern.
Pardon me?
9 o'clock Eastern.
Yes, thank you. 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Western. So show up, cheer me on, or boo me, hiss me out, throw tomatoes. I don't care. And is that all? Is there anything else to announce? Anything else important?
I don't think so. Just have a great rest of the day.
Okay. Have a good rest of the day. We'll talk to you Thursday. Bye for now.